Oh, thank you. Well, yeah, I guess it looks.
Is the judge ready?
Yes.
Is the timer ready?
Yes.
Is the negative speaker ready?
Yes.
Let's begin. Quote, freedom cannot be bestowed. It must be achieved. End quote. Albert Hubbard. Good morning. My name is Elijah Peck, and I stand firmly resolved that the issue of slavery is not a justified reason for the American Civil War. Observation 1, definitions. To provide clarification for today's debate, I offer the following definitions. Definition 1, justified. Quote, having, done for, or marked by a good or legitimate reason. End quote. Source, Oxford University. Second definition, human being. Quote, a man, woman, or child of the species Homo sapiens, distinguished from other animals by superior mental development, power of articulate speech, and upright stance. End quote. Source, Oxford University. Definition 3, living thing or life. Quote, a living thing pertains to any organism or a life form that possesses or shows the characteristics of life or being alive. The fundamental characteristics are as follows. Having an organized structure, requiring energy, responding to stimuli and adapting to environmental changes, and capable of reproduction, growth, movement, metabolism, and death. End quote. Source, Biology Online. And my final definition is freedom. Quote, the state of not being imprisoned or enslaved. End quote. Source, Oxford University. Observation 2, value. My value today is liberty. Liberty is defined as, quote, the state of being free within society from oppressive restrictions imposed by authority on one's way of life, behavior, or political views. End quote. Source, Oxford University. This will be my main point throughout the debate. Observation 3, criteria. My criterion for today's debate is that we recognize and maintain individual liberty for all the people of America. Observation 4, contentions. In affirming the resolution and my value, I offer the following contentions. Contention 1, the issue with slavery. Slavery had been around since the founding of the United States in 1776. There were many problems with this institution of slavery in America. Examples of this are as follows. Example 1, unconstitutional. The Constitution declares and protects that everyone has individual rights, all involving their right to freedom in one way or another. By enslaving someone, you rid them of those rights. Example 2, growth. Slavery has most certainly become more popular as time went on. Slavery most certainly became more popular as time went on. In the early years of America, there were roughly 300,000 slaves. That number increased to approximately 3 million before the Civil War. There was no sign of slavery being abolished anytime soon by means of natural causes, so Union decided to force the issue. Contention 2, founding principles. The Founding Fathers made their intentions clear regarding what America was supposed to be. This can be shown in 2 examples. Example 1, the Constitution. Not the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. Quote, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they were endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Source, Declaration of Independence. The Founding Fathers believed that each and every human being was created equal and had certain rights that could not be infringed upon. They believed that everyone had the rights to life, the right to liberty, and the right to pursue happiness. However, how can one consider these 3 promises to be true and upheld when slavery is so prominent? The answer, you can't. It is impossible to declare a nation to be free and allow certain individuals to be owned. Example 2, the Pledge of Allegiance. Quote, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. End quote. Source, Pledge of Allegiance. We are designed to be one united nation with a promise to provide liberty and justice for all who reside within our borders. These were the founding ideas behind the creation of the United States. The founding fathers believed that anyone, regardless of their past, could come here and experience a new life and a new type of government. A government that promised freedom, a promise that drove so many to fight for the independence of this great nation. Observation 4, conclusion. In conclusion, I urge you, Judge, to stand with me as I am firmly resolved that the issue of slavery was a justified reason for the American Civil War. The Union, realizing that the idea of slavery was unconstitutional, decided to do something about it. This injustice and denial of liberty had to be stopped. With the Confederacy being so adamant about continuing to embrace slavery and deny slaves as real men, only one option seemed to remain, and that was war. Thank you. I now stand ready for cross-examination.
Yes. Time ready? Yes. Let's begin. I trust you are doing well today. In your second contention on founding principles, you had stated an example of the Declaration of Independence. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, would you say that the Declaration of Independence was upheld by the Union?
I would say that they were fighting for what was written in the Declaration of Independence.
Yes, thank you. And would you say that you quoted one united? Is that true?
Yes.
And would you say that one united was the purpose of the Union? The Union was in power to be united.
The Union believed that all men were created equal, and that we should all have the same rights, and if all those rights were recognized, we could all become united, standing for liberty and justice for all.
Yes. And would you state that also the Union dictated and also wanted to pursue freedom?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And would you say that the President of the United States has the responsibility to uphold and keep the Union? Uphold the Union.
I think the president was supposed to stand for what was right, and that was the abolishment of slavery, which is what the Union stood for.
Okay, thank you. I would like prep time and there's Is the judge ready?
Yes.
Is the timer ready?
Yes.
Then let's begin. Everyone understands that some of America's history reflected the aspect of slavery. However, some people believe that the issue of slavery was a justified reason for the American Civil War, while others believe that slavery was not a justified reason for the topic and the reason for the American Civil War. Good afternoon. I, Grace Visser, stand firmly against the resolution that the issue of slavery was a justified reason for the American Civil War. I would like to state that I agree with the affirmative speaker's definitions. To begin, the issue at hand is the issue of slavery was not justified reason for the American Civil War. The affirmative speaker, in his second contention, stated examples of the founding principles. Honestly, I can say that I have nothing against what he says. I have no argument for why slavery was against the Constitution, unconstitutional. It was not just. It wasn't. But I have one reason against it. The reason why I stand here today is state that slavery was not the justified reason that the Northern Americans went to Civil War. And that is from the letter Abraham Lincoln wrote to Horace Greeley, a United States representative, quote, "If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it all by freeing the slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. End quote, Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln prepared and declared war as the President of the United States. The affirmative speaker agreed that the President upheld and did what he had to do. He had to do what was best, to uphold the Union. The Union our founding fathers formed. Last time I checked, history undoubtedly disproves the argument that the issue of slavery was a justified reason for the American Civil War, for Lincoln declared war to free the Union, not the slaves. To save the Union, not necessarily the slaves. In conclusion, as the first affirmative speaker, I stand firmly resolved that the issue of slavery was not a justified reason for the American Civil War. Consider Abraham Lincoln's letter, a letter written by the President of the United States proposing an instruction for there to be a war between the North and the South. Our country does not fully rest on a house divided, but rather a union, one nation under God. Judge, I urge you to ponder my argument. You too might agree that slavery was unjust, but it wasn't just about injustice, but a nation as one. Thank you. I now stand ready for cross-examination.
Mr. Judge, is time ready?
Yes.
All right, let's begin. Trust you're doing well today.
Yes.
Could I start by asking you what your value is in today's debate?
My value is to uphold and preserve you.
Okay. What do you believe was the final result of the Civil War?
What do you mean? The result that
What came of the Civil War? What resulted after the conclusion of the Civil War? What happened?
the Union was upheld and the country became one.
Okay. So because of the Civil War, did slaves become free?
Yes, according to Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation.
Okay, so you believe that there were no other factors. It was the war was the final deciding factor of slaves becoming free in the United States.
Can I ask, are you asking that is the reason that we went to war for the reason of slavery?
No, I'm asking if you think that the freedom of slaves was in direct relation to the Civil War.
It was a relation, but not. It might have been a relation, but it wasn't the reason.
So had the Civil War not have happened, you still think that slaves would have been free? Or not free? Still been enslaved?
No, because according to Abraham Lincoln formed a series of documents, and one of these documents was a letter, which he clearly stated to Horace Greeley that he went to war to save the Union. If he wanted to go, he says, if I could save the Union without freeing any slaves, I would. If I could save the Union without freeing all slaves, I would do it. If I could save it by freeing some slaves and leaving others alone, I would do it. He didn't necessarily state he wanted to go to war to save the slaves, but he wanted to save the Union. And he clearly stated that. But by the Emancipation Proclamation, he also, by saving the Union, upholding the Constitution, slaves would be free.
Okay, no further questions. Is the judge ready?
Yes.
I'm ready.
Yes.
All right, let's begin. Now I'd like to begin by restating my value. My value today is liberty. Liberty is defined as, quote, the state of being free within society from oppressive restrictions imposed by authority on one's way of life, behavior, or political views. source, Oxford University. Looking at my contentions, they back up my value in showing that America was founded to uphold the liberties to all Americans. Not some Americans, but all Americans. My opponent argues that the Union was not fighting to free slaves in America. They were more fighting to defend themselves and the Union. And I agree. The war was started because the Confederacy wanted to keep slaves. However, even though the initial idea behind the Civil War was for the Confederacy to keep slaves, the final result ended otherwise. The war ended up having a much greater meaning than just an idea to keep slavery. Because the Union fought to defend themselves and eventually decided to fight for the freedom of all of those in America, people today are able to be free and experience the freedom that all of us have. In conclusion, I urge you again to stand against the resolution. Wrong side. I urge you to stand with the resolution that the issue of slavery was a justified reason for the American Civil War. The Union was fighting for themselves, and in doing so, fought to free slaves. Thank you.
Yes. Is the timer?
Yes.
I think it's okay. Is the affirmative speaker ready?
Yes.
Judge, I would like to ask you 2 questions. How can there be liberty when a house is divided? 2, how can there be freedom when the union is divided? In viewing and comparing the affirmative speaker, the issue of contention 1, issue of slavery, contention 2, founding principle, there is no significant fact why the issue of slavery was a justified reason for the Civil War. Let me read Abraham Lincoln's letter to Horace. This quote, "The sooner the national authority can be restored, the nearer the Union will be the Union as it was. If there be those who would not save the Union unless they could at the same time save slavery, I do not agree with them. If there be those who would not save the Union unless they could do at that same time destroy slavery, I would not agree with them. My prominent object in the struggle to save the Union, it is not either to save or destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save the Union by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. What I do about slavery and the colored race, I do because I believe it helps to save the Union. And what I forbear because I do not believe it would help to save the Union. I shall do less whenever I shall believe what I am doing hurts the cause. And I shall do more whenever I shall believe doing more will help the cause. I shall try to connect errors and show to be errors. I shall adopt new views so fast as they shall appear to be true views. I've here stated my purpose. The purpose of the American Civil War, according to my view of official duty as the President of the United States of America. And I intend no modifications of my oft expressed personal wish that all men every day where could be free. Yours truly, Abraham Lincoln. Affirmative speakers, last very last quote, the last line he stated in his argument. The Union was fighting for themselves. In doing so, they freed slaves. That is the very issue I'm stating. Abraham Lincoln went to war to free slaves. However, he said if I could go to war and save the Union while saving slaves, I would do so. As a negative speaker, I agree with the affirmative speaker that the aspects of America's history did reflect slavery. I stand undoubtedly that the bonds of slavery were exemplified in America's past. But why we are here today stands whether slavery was the reason we went to war. And this is not a fact. It was because we had to save the Union. In conclusion, as the negative speaker, I stand firmly against the resolution that the issue of slavery was not a justified reason for the American Civil War. Judge, I ask you those two questions again. How can there be liberty when a house is divided? And how can there be freedom? Freedom when the Union is no more. Thank you.
Is the judge ready?
3 minutes.
Okay.
Yes, I am ready.
Is the timer ready?
Yes.
Okay, let's begin. Quote, freedom cannot be bestowed. It must be achieved. End quote. Albert Hubbard. My opponent is arguing that the point of the Civil War was not slavery. And with that, to an extent, I would agree. The Union was fighting to defend themselves. However, throughout the war, they realized that they were fighting for a much bigger cause. They were fighting to end slavery. The negative's question of how can there be liberty when there is division is completely accurate. If we are divided, then liberty cannot be upheld for all. However, that is why the Union was fighting to try to defend themselves and free all the slaves. So that way slavery would no longer be a dividing line in our country. In conclusion, I would like to restate my value. The value is liberty. The Union fought to hold liberty for all. They did that by fighting for themselves and for fighting to try to free slavery, or try to end slavery. I stand firmly resolved and hope that you agree with me that the issue of slavery was not, or was a justified reason for the American